All right, I will say good morning. Let us begin a lot to do today. Today's daf is Daf Lamed in Maseches Yevamos. We thank our Talmud Torah sponsors. Our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Nisan. We thank, again, Jerry, a new Talmud Torah sponsor, Jerry and Abby Applebaum, in loving memory of Abby's mother, Barbara Friedman Basya Baschaim, on the occasion of her first yahrzeit, and her father, David Ben Avram, on the occasion of his 9th yahrzeit. We thank Doctors Paul and Linda Weinberg for the dedicating all the Shimon Drushos this month, the commemoration of the 36th yahrzeit of their son, Mordechai Yehoshua ben Peretz Moshe v'Leah Miriam. We thank Paul and Kathy Pollack for dedicating the Shimon Drushos this month in the zchus, a refuah sheileimah for Kathy's sister, Donna Baker-Matson. We thank Teri Czinn for dedicating the Shimon Drushos this month with gratitude to Hashem for their third grandson, Bunim Tzvi Hersch Czinn. And we thank Naftali Tilson for dedicating the Shimon Drushos this month with Hakaras HaTov to his chaver Benjamin Wohl, and with wishes of a Chag Kasher V'Sameach to the entire shir. Abosai, with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Daf Lamed. We are picking up at the top. Mishnah Abosai, I sent out on the WhatsApp and also made copies if anyone wants. Copies are somewhere here. They're the same charts from the Art Scroll Gemara, but it's helpful to be able to look at them. They're actually not complicated. They're not complicated at all. Actually, pretty straightforward cases today, just helpful to have a visual aid. So we'll say, so today's daf is Daf Lamed. We are picking up at the Mishnah. So the Mishnah on the top of Lamed says as follows. Shlosha achin. We'll say it's actually very similar to all the cases we've been dealing with up until this point in time. Shlosha achin. Shnai mehen nesuin shtei achayos. You have three brothers, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Reuven and Shimon are married to two sisters. Ve'echa nasoi nachris. Levi is married to an unrelated woman. So what happens? Echad mi ba'ale achayos. Meis echad mi ba'ale achayos. So we'll say, so take a look. This is what we call case one. Case one. So if you take a look on the top, I meant to number the lines, but if you take a look, case one, which is the top left box. So you've got three brothers, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Reuven and Shimon are married to two sisters, Rachel and Leah. Levi is related to a woman unrelated. We just call her unrelated woman in this case. Good. What happens? Now if you look in line number 2 in the box of case 1, so Shimon dies. Meis echad mi ba'ale achayos. Shimon dies. V'kines nasoi nachris es ishto. And Levi does yibum. Of course, we're both saying in this case, the only option is for Levi to do yibum, right? Reuven can't do yibum. Why not? Achos ishto, right? Because ultimately, again, remember, Leah is Reuven's wife's sister. So Levi does yibum. Wonderful. Shalom Yisrael. What happens? Umeis. Now I'll say, now if you look at line 3 in the box that says case number 1, Levi passes away. Now in this case, when Levi passes away, two women fall to Reuven for yibum, right? There's Leah, who was originally Shimon's wife, who Levi married as part of Yibum, and then there's Levi's original wife. We call her unrelated. So both of these women fall to Reuven for Yibum. We'll say the truth is, for us in Yevamos already, this is like a layup case, right? This is easy. We know the halacha over here. What's the halacha? So the Gemara says, easy. Let's say in this case, both women ultimately again are exempt from everything. Remember again, Leah is exempt ultimately from Yibum or Chalitza. Why? Because she is Reuven's wife's sister, and unrelated wife is the Tzara, right? So we'll say this is like the first Mishnah in the Masechta. This is Tzaras Erva, right? Essentially, remember again, Leah is an Erva to Reuven. She is his wife's sister. And unrelated, calling her, I feel bad, she should get a name, but we'll call her unrelated, right? Unrelated, ultimately, again, is the co-wife of a tzara. When you're a co-wife of a tzara, you're the co-wife of an erva. Tzara of an erva, you take on the same status of erva. Therefore, both women are exempt from everything. Beautiful. But we'll say, what now? Let's do a little bit of a ripple in that case. What happens, however? Asaba ma'amar umis. We'll say, let's take a look. Still take a look. I told you, right? That's case 1, right? Easy. But say, take a look now, still in table 1. But imagine the following scenario. Same case, Reuven and Shimon married to two sisters. Levi married to an unrelated woman. Shimon dies. Leah falls before Levi for Yibum. Let's say Levi didn't do Yibum. Instead, what did he do? He did Ma'amar. Right? Yesterday's daf. He did ma'amar. Or the day before. Asaba ma'amar. So what happens? So the Gemara says, Asaba ma'amar umei. So now let's say Levi did ma'amar with Leah, and then he died. So now I both say, what's happening over here? That means again, when Levi passes away, two women once again fall before Reuven. One of them is Levi's actual wife, the woman who he was married to, and the other was Leah, who was the Yevamos with whom he did ma'amar. What's the halacha in this case? So asaba ma'amar umeis nochris cholet says v'lo misyabemes. So both say in this case over here, so obviously Leah can't do anything, right? Why can't Leah do anything with Reuven? Why not? Because she is his wife's sister. But I will say, in this case, remember, Levi wasn't married to Leah. They had not done Yibum. Because they had not done Yibum, therefore what? Therefore, technically, unrelated is not really a tsaras erva. Because she's not a tsaras erva, she's not the koif of an erva, therefore what? She has to do chalitza and not Yibum. Now I will say, why can't she just go ahead and do Yibum as well? In other words, if she's not the koif of an erva, why can't she do Yibum? So we know the answer to this. What's the answer to that? It sounds like according to the Mishnah, because halacha l'maisa, ma'amar affected some level of connection. Right? So ma'amar, we'll see in the Gemara. So we'll say, so therefore that's case number one. So case number one is really comprised of two parts. The first part where Levi actually did Yibum with Leah, and when Levi did actual Yibum with Leah, then when Levi dies and his two wives fall before Reuven, that's an easy case. Leah is exempt because she's achos ishto, right? And unrelated is exempt because she is tsaras erva. If Levi didn't do Yibum, but instead Levi just did ma'amar with Leah, then Leah is still going to be exempt because she's achos ishto, Levi's wife's sister, and co-wife is going to, and unrelated will be subject to chalitza. Beautiful. Says the Gemara, Taima da'avad ba'ma'amar. The only reason ultimately is because he did ma'amar. So we'll say, in other words, the only reason why we make unrelated do chalitza is because Levi did ma'amar with Leah. Halo avad ma'amar. But again, had Levi not done ma'amar, and so that means there would be no marital bond between Levi and Leah, then what? Then ultimately, halo avad ba'ma'amar. Nochris Yevumi Namim Yabma. The unrelated woman would have even been able to do Yibum. Rav Nachman says, Zos Omeres Ein Zeka Va'afilu Bechadacha. What do you see from here, Abosai? You see from here that we hold in Zeka. Why, Abosai? Because if there really was Zika, if there really was connection, then what? Then Levi's maritally bound to Leah, even if he didn't do ma'amar. And if that's the case, then unrelated should take on the status of tsaras erva, even though they haven't done ma'amar. From the fact that you require ma'amar to affect some level of marital bond must mean that what we hold in Zika. There's no marital connection. There's no marital bond. Now I will say, we already know we pass in Yesh Zika. That's how we pass in. So again, this I'll just point out, this Mishnah here and this Gemara is not really a halacha l'maisa sugya. We're going to see the halacha l'maisa in just a little bit. I will say, but that's case one. Good. See, I told you, not complicated. That's the first table. We're 1/4 into this. Everything's beautiful. Next Mishnah. Here we go. I will say this is going to be case 2 on your sheet. Here we go. Shlosha achin. It's really the same general case. Shlosha achin, shnai mehem nesu shtei achayos ve'achan nasoi nochris. So we'll say, take a look at case number 2, table number 2. So pretty much same general idea. 3 brothers, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Reuven and Shimon married to 2 sisters, and Levi married to unrelated woman. Okay, now what happens? So, umeis hanasui nochris. Now we'll say, in this case, a little bit different. Who dies over here? Levi. Levi dies, and an unrelated falls to Yibum to Shimon. Now, I'll say the truth is, she could fall to Yibum to either who? Either Reuven or Shimon, right? Because remember, she's unrelated. But in this case over here, Shimon is the one who does Yibum. Okay. What happens? So, Meis Hanasa Inachris Levi, the man married to the unrelated woman, passes away. Vikines Echad mi Ba'ale Achayos as Ishto, and one of the brothers who's married to a sister does yibum with Levi's wife. So again, I will say in case number 2, second line, Shimon is doing yibum with Levi's wife, called unrelated. Okay, now we'll say, now what happens? Umeis. Now we'll say, now in this case over here, case number 2, Shimon dies. We're up to the third line in case number 2. Shimon now passes away. Now when Shimon passes away, what happens? Once again, 2 women fall to Reuven. Right? Shimon's wife, Leah, and unrelated. And Levi's wife, with whom he did Yibum. Now, we'll say, again, easy case. What's halacha there? What's halacha? What could Reuven do? Nothing. Why? Number 1, he can't do Yibum with Leah, because Leah is what? His wife's sister, Achos Ishto. And he can't do Yibum with unrelated. Why? Sarah. Good. We'll say, easy case. Sarah, straightforward. So, Harishoni Yosef, Mishum Achos Isha. So, ultimately, again, Leah doesn't do Yibum, obviously, because she is Reuven's sister's wife's sister. Ushnia Mishum Sarasa. And again, what we'll call unrelated, which was Levi's wife with whom Shimon did Yibum, ultimately will be exempt because of Tsaras Erba. Beautiful. Now we'll say what happens in this case. Asaba Ma'amar. So we'll say pretty much the same thing as the previous Mishnah. What happens, again, looking at case number 2, if Shimon didn't yet do Yibum with unrelated, rather what did he do? He did Ma'amar. He did Ma'amar with unrelated. So what happens if he did Ma'amar with her? Asaba Ma'amar Umeis. So now what happens if Shimon did Ma'amar with unrelated woman and then he dies? What's the halacha? Nochris choletzes v'lo misyabemes. Once again, obviously Leah is not going to do anything, right? Because Leah is Reuven's wife's sister. Unrelated woman in this case will do chalitza and can't do yibum. Okay, so we'll say, so this is the same case as before, which the Gemara says, hasulamali. In other words, why do you need this case? Again, in other words, we already spoke about this. And I will say, you see, what's happening over here is, the reason why we're making unrelated women do chalitza is why, in this case, because I will say, essentially, since Shimon did Ma'amar looks like a marriage. So it looks like unrelated woman is what? What does it look like she is? Tsaras Erba. It looks like she's one. But she's not really Tsaras Erba, right? She's not really. So in other words, if she was Tsaras Erba, she could leave without anything, right? If she's not Tsaras Erba, she could do Yibum. So she's not really a Tsaras Erba, but she kind of looks like a Tsaras Erba, so we make her do Chalitza to kind of take away all that. To which the Gemara says, but I don't understand, Hasulamali. Both say, the second Mishnah is saying the same exact case as the first. The only thing that changed between Mishnah 1 and Mishnah 2 is what? Who died. Otherwise, literally again, it's 2 Mishnayos made up of 2 cases, exactly the same dynamics. To which the Gemara says, Hasulam li hainuhach. The Mishnayos are mamish the same. The only thing that changes is who died. To which the Gemara says, Hashta uma hasam da achos isha hab yitzar lenachris amre nachris asura. And I will say furthermore, in the previous case, where ultimately, again, it was the Achos Isha who becomes the Tzara. I will say it was the Achos Isha, right, and the Leah, who becomes the second wife, becomes the second wife. So Amra Nachris Asura. So even when it's the Achos Isha becomes the second wife, yet Halacha Lamaisa, she still asers the already existing wife. Hacha, the Nachris Hab Yitzara the Achos Isha, La Kol Shekain. Over here, I will say all the more so. Where halacha lamaisa, right? It is the nachris, the unrelated wife, who becomes the second wife. Ultimately, again, to the sister. All the more so she asks us. No, both say. What the Gemara is pointing out is something very interesting, which we actually never focused on, which is doesn't matter who is the first wife. It doesn't matter who is the first wife. The Gemara is just pointing out in the first Mishnah. It's the nachris, unrelated woman who is the first wife, and then the sister who becomes the second wife. Right? In our case, it's the sister who is the first wife, and the nachris who becomes the second wife. So the Gemara says, if halacha lemaisa, the halacha is true ultimately in our case, in the Mishnah we just read, where the sister is the first wife, all the more so in the previous Mishnah, to which the Gemara says, Tana, so the Gemara says, Tana, Hach tana bareisha, v'hach chazia lehetera v'sharia, v'hader chazia le'isura. So we'll say, here's what happened. Originally the Tana taught this Mishnah first, and ultimately thought the previous case was permitted. V'hader chazia le'isura, and ultimately again then he ruled that in this Mishnah it's prohibited as well. V'aidi dechaviv alei, and since ultimately again he liked this Mishnah first, right, the one that was more chashiv to him, akdima, he put it first. Umishna lo zaza min koma. But our Mishnah ultimately did not change the order. So therefore, I will say, interesting, what the Gemara is suggesting over here is that the Tana really taught the second Mishnah first, because the second Mishnah is a bit more novel than the first. But ultimately, again, the Mishnah maintained the already established order of the first Mishnah and then the second Mishnah. Good, not really introducing any new information. I will say, what I will tell you something very interesting. I will get to the Rambam, because the Rambam does paskin like this second Mishnah. That halacha l'maisa, this is Perek Zayin, halacha Zayin in Hilchos Yibum, where I'll just say the Rambam says as follows. The Rambam says, Meis zeh she'asar ha'ma'amar, v'haisalo isha acheres, v'naflu shtein lefnei bala achos, ba'alas ha'mamar p'tura min ha'chalitza, u'min ha'yibum, shari achos ishto. Va'isha acheres, choletzes v'lo misyabemes, she'ein ha'ma'amar kone kinyan gomer at shifter satzara. I will say, the way the Rambam paskins is, in any of these cases, if the surviving brother didn't do yibum, but he did ma'amar, I will say, remember again, we established 2 days ago, that what does ma'amar do? What does ma'amar do? Not that much, right? What ma'amar kind of does is, it's almost as if, right, as soon as the brother dies, I will say, what sets in, right? Reuven, Shimon, Levi. As soon as Reuven dies, what sets in for Shimon and Levi? What sets in? One word. Yeah, Yibum, that's true, right? Another word? Zika, right? Zika, right? There's a Zika. What does Zika do? Zika goes ahead and creates a quasi-marital bond. What Ma'amar seems to do is what? Strengthen it a bit more. Again, to be clear, does Ma'amar affect Erusin? No. Ma'amar affect Nisuin? No. Ma'amar affect Chuppah? No. What does it affect? It's kind of hard to know, right? Here's what we know is that it seems to bolster Zika just a little bit. And I also know that if the Yavam does Ma'amar and then he changes his mind, what does he have to do? He has to give a get. Right, so again, there are certain processes that are triggered ultimately again because of ma'amar. So therefore, again, in these cases, halacha l'maisa, if you look at either of these tables, it doesn't really matter. Where the brother who was going to do yibum, if he just did ma'amar and then he dies, ultimately again, because that doesn't really affect a complete marriage, so the woman who is Reuven's wife's sister, she goes out without anything. But the other woman, the Yevama, is going to require chalitza and won't be able to do yibum. Incredible. But let's say third Mishnah. Shlosha achin. Here we go. Table 3. Or say case 3. Shlosha achin. 3 brothers. Shnai mehen nisuin shtei achayos ve'achad nasuin nochris. 3 brothers. 2 of them are married to 2 sisters, and 1 is married to an unrelated woman. So we'll say, if you look at table 3, same case. Reuven, Shimon, Levi. Reuven and Shimon married to 2 sisters. Ultimately, again, Levi married to unrelated woman. So I will say now what happened over here, line number 2 in box number 3. So one of the brothers, we'll call him Shimon. Shimon passes away, and Levi does yibum with his wife Leah. Great. I will say now something different happens over here. Umesa ishto shal sheni. I will say in this case now, look at the third line in case number 3. Reuven's wife dies. So in this case now, Rachel passed away. I will say, you know where this is going? Watch this, or maybe not. Right? What happens? So I will say, what happens? So says the Gemara, Meise ishtal shal sheni, va'achar kach meis nasui nochris. So I will say, here's the order. All right, let's start again. Let's start again in case number 3. 3 brothers, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Reuven and Shimon married to 2 sisters, Rachel and Leah. Levi married to unrelated woman. Okay, second line, Shimon dies. Levi does yibum with Leah. So now Levi has 2 wives, Leah and unrelated woman. The line that's not included in here is in between, right? Really, line 2.5 is Reuven's wife Rachel passes away. Okay, so now Reuven is single, no wife. Last line, Levi dies. Levi dies. Then I both say, when Levi dies, something very interesting happens, which is, two women now fall to Reuven for Yibum. Who are the two women? Unrelated wife of Levi, and Leah. Then I will say, who's Leah to Rachel? Who's Leah to Reuven? Who's Leah to Reuven? It's Reuven's former wife's sister. Right? Reuven's deceased wife's sister. Right? Because Reuven was married to Rachel, but Rachel already passed away. So now Leah, his wife's sister, is falling to him in Yibum. But again, Rachel, his wife, has already passed away. What's the halach over here? Harezeh asura alav olamis hoil v'ne'esra alav shah achas. Wow. Says the Gemara something absolutely amazing. Listen to this. Once Leah fell to Yibum to Reuven. I will say, when did Leah fall to Yibum to Reuven? Right? When did she become eligible to Yibum to Reuven? Remember again, when Shimon died. Right? Remember again, she falls into the Yibum pool. The first time that Leah falls into the Yibum pool is when Shimon passed away. Right? That's the first time she falls into the Yibum pool. At that point in time, she's absolutely ineligible to Reuven, because Reuven is married to her sister. So what the Mishnah is introducing to us is as follows: that essentially Yibum identity is solidified and concretized at the moment you fall into the Yibum pool. And in this particular case, when Leah fell into the Yibum pool the first time, she was asura to Reuven as achos ishto, as Reuven's wife's sister. That status, amazingly enough, remains upon her, even though what? She subsequently remarries, right? She does Yibum to Levi, and Reuven's wife passed away. Nevertheless, ultimately, when Levi then passes away, he cannot do Yibum with Leah, because ultimately, again, she is still considered to be his wife's sister, and ultimately usher to marry. Now I will say, I just want to be clear. The prohibition of marrying one's wife's sister is only when one's wife is alive. So I want to be clear. The prohibition that's happening over here, this is not the erev of achos isho. This is an Isser Yibum. This is an Isser Yibum. What this is saying is your Yibum identity and your Yibum eligibility is determined the first time you fall into the Yibum pool. And so in this case over here, the first time Leah fell into the Yibum pool, after the death of her husband Shimon, she was asura to Reuven as Reuven's wife's sister. That status is locked in. So therefore, again, even though she suddenly does Yibum with Levi, and now again, Rachel, Reuven's wife, dies, and now Levi dies, when Leah falls into the pool again, she already has a solidified and concretized identity as being asura to Yibum to Reuven. Incredible. Says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yehuda Rav, Kol Yevamos she'ena nichore ba b'shas nefila, Yevamo yavo aleha, harehi ke'eshes ach sheyesh labanim ba'asura. So also we've already had this concept, right? We've already said this before. Rav said, any woman who is not eligible for Yibum, in other words, literally translated, any woman with whom the Yavam cannot affect Yibum with, at the time, ultimately, again, that she becomes eligible for Yibum, essentially retains the status of Eshes Ach, retains the status of my brother's wife, and as if my brother had children, i.e., she's Asura. So Gemara says, "My Kamashlan Tanina, Harezeh Asura Lav Olamis, Ho'ov and Ezra Lav Sha'achos." We learned this already. We've established this, that Yibum identity, or I should say Yibum eligibility, is determined, solidified, and concretized at the moment you fall into the Yibum pool. And if at the moment you fall into the pool, you are ineligible, that's it. You're out. That status does not change. So therefore, of course, when Leah initially fell into the Yibum pool, after the death of her first husband, Shimon, she was ineligible to do Yibum with Reuven, or Reuven was ineligible to do Yibum with her, because ultimately she is his wife's sister. And that ineligibility remains, even though she subsequently marries, does Yibum with Levi, and then after that, Reuven's wife passes away. So by the time that Levi passes away, Leah is no longer Reuven's wife's sister, because Reuven's wife is dead. She passed away. There's something to talk about. Nevertheless, her Yibum identity has already been solidified and concretized from the initial time she fell into the pool. We learned that. We've learned this already. So what are you coming to teach me? Ma'udetema, hani mili, dilo, ichza la benefilu rishona, aval hecha de ichazya le benefilu rishona imateshtari. See, I will say, I might have thought maybe that means like this. This is actually very interesting, havamina. I might have thought that halacha l'maisa, maybe when do we say that a woman is permanently ineligible for yibum? Is maybe when she falls into the yibum pool and there's no brother to do yibum for her. In other words, maybe that's when we say that a person is marked. So I'll give you an example. Let's say halacha l'maisa, you had 3 brothers who are married to 3 sisters. So in that case, what happens when one of the brothers dies without children? What happens? Nothing. In other words, no one's able to do yibum. I would have thought that when does a person become permanently ineligible? When does one become permanently ineligible for yibum? When she falls into the pool, no one is able to do yibum with her. No one is able to do yibum with her. But I might have thought that what? I might have thought that halacha l'maisa. Maybe, when she becomes eligible to one of the brothers, maybe because she's eligible for yibum, that doesn't create a permanent ineligibility. In other words, we'll say, if you take a look at our case, take a look at Rashi for just a moment. Rashi says, so we'll say, we're going to see, take a look at Rashi. When she's eligible during the first time, the Gemara says, so ultimately, again, I will say, in other words, what the Gemara is suggesting is maybe the only time we say that there's permanent ineligibility is when no one really has the ability to marry her. Look, actually, let's go on in the Gemara. Hanami Tanina, Shnei Achin Nesuin Shtei Achayos. 2 brothers are married to 2 sisters. Meis Echon Mehem, one of the brothers died. Biachar Kach Meisa Ishto Shasheni. That was his interesting case. Reuven and Shimon married to 2 sisters. What happens? Reuven dies, and after Reuven died, but before Shimon was able to do anything, Shimon's wife Leah dies. So now, interestingly enough, you have Rachel, who is the widow of Reuven, and Shimon, who is no longer married to the sister of Leah, to the sister of Rachel, So what's the halacha? Harei zu asura alav olamis, hoyol b'ne'asra alav sha'achas. We already learned this. That what? Even though I will say, when you look at this case, right, when you look at that case I just mentioned, you're tempted to say, what's the halacha? Shimon should be able to do yibum. Why should Shimon be able to do yibum? Why? Because Lamaisa, he's the surviving brother, and he's no longer married to the widow's sister because she passed away. Yet we know the halacha is asura. Rabbi will say, why? Because we keep going back to the same point. When is yibum eligibility determined? At the moment the woman falls into the yibum pool. Right? At the moment she becomes a widow, we look at, okay, are you eligible or not? If you're eligible, great. If you're not eligible, that ineligibility ultimately, again, is locked in and solidified and remains, even if other marital realities change. So we already learned this. So what would I have thought? So I'll say, now again, this is what the Gemara is saying. I would have thought that maybe, in the case of the 2 brothers, maybe the reason why her ineligibility is permanent is because halacha l'maisa, there's no brother that can do yibum with her. Aval hachav delo idchila mehai beis legamri ema migu de chazi lahai nasui nachris chazi nami lahai. If you think about it, our case of the 3 brothers is a little bit different. What makes it a little bit different is that there is yibum eligibility, right? Because remember again, when Shimon passes away and Leah becomes a widow, remember, Reuven can't do yibum with her, but who can? Levi. So I would have thought that because of that, maybe in this case, Leah's ineligibility is not permanent. In other words, it's not, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not complete. She's not completely ineligible. She's just ineligible to do it with one brother. But Lamaisa, yibum is permitted with Levi. I might have thought in a case like that, maybe, if Reuven's circumstances change as well, meaning that his wife Rachel passes away, then after Levi dies, maybe he can go ahead and do yibum with Leah. Kamashma and Abosai, we go back to our previously established principle, which is that halacha l'maisa yibum eligibility is determined immediately upon widowhood. Right? The moment the woman becomes a widow, we see who she is eligible to do yibum with. Whichever brother she's able to do it with, great. Rabbi Osai, whichever brother she is ineligible to do yibum with, that ineligibility is locked in. Even if what? Even if what? Circumstances change. So therefore, Rabbi Osai, again, in this case, where Shimon passes away, and now Leah is subject to yibum to two brothers, Levi and Reuven. She cannot do yibum with Reuven because Reuven is married to her sister, to Rachel. Once Reuven becomes ineligible to do yibum, or once, I should say, Leah becomes ineligible to yibum to Reuven, that ineligibility is locked in and never changes. And even if Reuven's wife Rachel passes away, nevertheless, and then Levi passes away sometime later on, Reuven still can't do yibum. We'll say yibum eligibility determined at the moment of widowhood, and once that occurs, halacha l'maisa status is locked in. Incredible. We'll say case number 4. I told you, not complicated at all. Last Mishnah, Shlosha Achim, 3 brothers. Shnai mehen nisuin mibalei achayos, ve'echad. I'm sorry. Shnai mehen nisuin shtei achayos, ve'echad nasuin nachris. So both say same case, always the same case, right? So halacha l'maisa 3 brothers, 2 of them married to 2 sisters. So Reuven and Shimon married to 2 sisters. Levi married to an unrelated woman. So I'll say now here's the wrinkle. Giresh echad mibalei achayos es ishto. So I'll say in this case, if you look at case number 4, what happened over here? Shimon and Leah divorce. Okay, new case. Shimon and Leah divorce. Okay, fine. Now what happens? Girish echad mibalei achayos es ishto umeis nasui nachris. Here we go. And now in this case, Levi dies. And what happens? So the Gemara says, V'kinsa hamagarish. Okay, so now watch what's happening over here. Both say, take a look at case number 4. 3 brothers, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Reuven and Shimon are married to 2 sisters, Rachel and Leah. It's case, the second line, which I guess you do see, which is Shimon divorces Leah. Okay, fine, that's step 2. Step 3, which is line number 2. Now Levi dies. Shimon does yibum with unrelated. Okay, what's next? Umeis. Wow. So now Abba say what happens? Now Shimon dies. Now Abba say what happens when Shimon dies is the last line when Shimon dies. So unrelated wife who was originally
Why the word nachris?
I mean, she's not related. She's not related to anyone.
We have nachri, which is a bride.
No, I'm sorry, in this context it means unrelated. So says the Gemara, because how else are you going to say unrelated?
I don't know.
Right, that's why I use nachris. So this Gemara says like this. So look at the last line. So Abba says, so now what happens? So now Levi passes away. So watch this. So now Abba say, now unrelated is falling to Yibum to Shimon. Now Abba say, you look at this case and you're scratching and say, what are you saying to yourself? Right, what's the problem over here? Oh, what's intriguing about this case? You see, Shimon was married to Reuven's wife's sister. Right? So here's the sheileimah. Does the fact that he was married to Reuven's wife's sister somehow endow unrelated with some level of erva status? To which the Gemara says, no. Zohi sha'amru v'kulan shemesu o niskarshu tsarosehen mutaros. Now both say, good, this is another easy case. The Gemara says, no, there's no problem over here. We look at this like we're looking for what's the problem. There's no problem. Because why Rabbi said? Because at the end of the day, remember, this goes back to the same principle. When is Yibum eligibility determined? When? At the moment of widowhood. So when do we look at who's everyone's married to and who's everyone related to? When? At the time of death. So therefore, again, in this case, Shimon was no longer married to Leah at the time he did Yibum with unrelated. So when Levi passed away, by the time Levi passed away, Leah was already out of the picture. Because she's out of the picture, therefore she does not have an impact on anyone. So therefore, again, when Shimon dies and his wife, unrelated, who was the widow of Levi, falls to Reuven, absolutely no problem of Yibum. Beautiful. To which the Gemara says, Taima de girish v'achar kach meis. Now the reason this case works is why? Because Shimon divorced his wife, he divorced Leah before Levi passed away. Aval meis, the achar kach giresh. Rabbi, listen to this. What happens if Levi died before Shimon divorced his wife. Right? What happens if Levi died before Shimon divorced his wife? Then I will say, what does that sound like? That sounds like a surah. Right? That sounds like, then Rabbi will say, that what would happen? Then when Shimon, right? If Shimon were to divorce, Rabbi will say, listen to this wrinkle. What happens if, Levi were to die, but before Shimon did Yibum, he divorced Leah. Right? And then went ahead and did Yibum. It sounds like that would be problematic. Right? Because if Yesh Zeka, it would sound like in that situation, unrelated somehow becomes connected to Leah. See, even though, again, Leah's out of the picture before Shimon does Yibum, but she was in the picture at the moment that Levi died, that would seem to complicate the relationship. On Rav Ashi, also Meres, Yesh Zeka. Because we'll say, again, that actually makes sense. It actually makes sense. It sounds strange, but it actually makes sense that if Shimon was married to his wife Leah, ultimately, again, at the time that Levi died, and then Shimon divorced Leah, and then did Yibum with unrelated, nevertheless, unrelated has some level of connection with Leah. Why? Because Yesh Zeka, because there's a marital bond the moment that the brother dies. So therefore, what that means is that the moment that Levi died, Shimon has a marital relationship with Leah, some type of marital bond with Leah, but he's still what? Has a marital bond to unrelated, but he's still married to Leah, which means that on some level, unrelated is a little bit connected to Leah, which sounds like then, even though Shimon subsequently divorces Leah, right, and then Shimon dies, when unrelated falls to Reuven for Yibum, perhaps ultimately unrelated should be unable to do Yibum, only Chalitza, because Haloch Alamaisa, she has some marital bond, some level of marital connection to Leah. To which the Gemara says, even two brothers. Well, Rav Ashi, Kasher Rav Nachman, so we'll say according to Rav Ashi, we have a problem of what Rav Nachman said. About Rav Nachman said, so we'll say, so now we're referencing back to earlier sugis as well. Rav Ashi, Hu adin, Afa Gabdullah Avad Bam Ma'amar. The truth is, this is true even if halacha l'maisa, the brother never did marry. Let's say, look at Rashi for just a moment. Kasher de Rav Nachman, the daik le'el mistam masnisin, zos omeres ein zek afilu b'chara. Let's say, here's the problem. If you remember again, after the first Mishnah, right, the Mishnah, right, all the way back on the top of the daf, the Gemara said that we can infer from the Mishnah in zeka. Right, that's what Rav Nachman said. You see from here, ein zeka. Zos omeres ein zeka. But now, we'll say amazingly enough, what is the Gemara saying? Rav Ashi says, there is zeka. So what's going on over here? So which Rav Ashi kasha de Rav Nachman, and Rav Ashi, you're saying yesh zeka. What are you going to do with the statement of Rav Nachman that says ein zeka? To which the Gemara says, Amalek Rav Ashi will say, Hu adin da'afag Abdullah abad b'ma'amar nochris michlatz chalatz chalza yibumi lo miyavno. So we'll say, because Rav Ashi would say in the first Mishnah, even if halach l'maaseh Levi did not do ma'amar, still the unrelated wife would only do chalitza and not do yibum. V'hadik tani ma'amar. So why does it have to bring up the case of ma'amar? La fuke beis Shammai, to exclude the position of beis Shammai. Da amri ma'amar kona amud beis Kinyan Gomer. Because remember again, we had this 2 days ago, Beis Shammai is of the opinion that Ma'amar affects complete and comprehensive Kinyan. Right? Complete marriage. So to exclude that opinion of Beis Shammai, that's why we bring up Ma'amar. Kamash Malon, Delo Beis Shammai. Therefore, we'll bring up this case to show the halacha does not follow Beis Shammai. Rav Nachman, Kasher de Rav Ashi. We'll say Rav Nachman who says Ein Zeka in the first Mishnah, right? Or I should say Rav Nachman who infers Ein Zeka from the first Mishnah. What is he going to do with Rav Ashi, who learns that Yesh Zeka? V'chi Tema hu adin da'afilu meis v'achakach giresh sara samuteres. Maybe you'll say that even in a case where Levi died and only afterwards Shimon divorced, right, his wife, that halacha l'maisa, then when Shimon dies, that the co-wife should be permitted to Reuven. Elazohi l'me'ute mai. What does it come to exclude? L'me'ute kanas v'achakach girish. Maybe it comes to exclude the case where ultimately, again, Shimon first marries and then only afterwards divorces. Hanicha isavar lak Rabbi Yirmiyah. So that makes sense. You feel like Rabbi Yirmiyah da amar tavra misha shanazu lo shanazu v'haitana savar misa mapeles. So I will say, maybe if you say that it's different authors. And ultimately, again, this Tana holds Misa Mapelas. Remember again, we had a whole discussion about Halacha L'Maisa. When do we determine Yibum eligibility? So there's an opinion that holds Misa Mapelas, that it's the time of death. Literally, again, widowhood. The moment the woman becomes a widow, that determines her Yibum eligibility. V'hai Tana Savar Nisun Harishonim Apilim. And the other Tana holds that I will say, no, when is Yibum eligibility determined? It's interesting. It is fascinating. When is Yibum eligibility determined? At the time you get married. At the time you get married, we look at who's eligible to who, and that status gets like that. And I will say, we know how we paskin. We paskin already, Misa Mapelas. It's widowhood that determines Yibum eligibility. To which the Gemara says, then ultimately when the Mishnah says Zohi, that would come to exclude the case of Kanas, Ulubasov Giresh, the case of where the brother first married the Yevama, and then only afterwards divorced his wife. But ultimately, if you hold like Rava, who hold that it's all one Tana, one author, and it was, as we saw before, that sometimes stylistically the Mishnah will say things that you don't have to say, that we could infer, but the Mishnah will say it anyway. What does it come to exclude? It must see ultimately again that it holds like Rabbi Yirmiyah, ultimately the Yesh Zeka. The Rava Hanicha Isav Ravashi. And according to Rava, it makes sense if he holds like Ravashi who holds Yesh Zeka, Zohi Lemeute, Mace below Giresh. That would come to exclude the case, ultimately again, of where the brother passes away. Levi passed away before Shimon divorced his wife. Eli Isav Rab Nachman who holds Ein Zeka, Zohi Lemeute Mai, Arkachach Kravash Yisrael. You must see that ultimately again he holds Yesh Zeka. Good. We did that last part quickly, but let's just bring it all together. Halacha L'Maisa, here's what we've got. We keep reinforcing, we hold Yesh Zeka. Very important. We hold Yesh Zeka. Right? We've already established that before. We also hold that what? Ma'amar in Kona. Right? That Ma'amar does not affect Kiddushin. What else do we hold? Halacha L'Maisa will say, when is Yibum eligibility determined? When is it determined? At the time of widowhood. Right? That's when we look at that's when we look at familial eligibility. Right? We look at the panoramic family tree. Right? I use it panoramic because it's not up and down, but rather it's across. We look at the panoramic family tree at the time of death. And that's when eligibility is determined. However, Abosai, once eligibility is determined the first time, then what? That eligibility or ineligibility is locked in forever. Forever is a dramatic term, but you understand, right? That eligibility or ineligibility is locked in, and even should different marital realities change, once eligibility or ineligibility is determined, that is locked in going forward. Incredible. I will say last Mishnah for today. The Kulan Shebe, so I'll say this is great. This is actually great. I want to point out, we're actually going to do just no tables, no charts, just some good old Gemara. Watch this. The Kulan Sheishwan Kiddushin or Gershim B'Safi. And I will say, this is actually the beginning of a fascinating sugya. So Rashi points out over here, we're talking about the 15 arayos. So we're also going back to the first Mishnah in the Masechta. We'll remember again, how do we start our journey in Yevamos? We spoke about 15 women, where if you're married to them, what's the halacha? Now remember again, we're talking about 15 arayos. Now we'll say, the 15 arayos were arayos for who? Not for the man who was married to them. Right? So remember again, just take a simple case. You've got Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Reuven is married to one of the 15 women mentioned in the Mishnah. For Reuven, in the first Mishnah, these are all eligible women. The problem is they're an erva for Shimon. We'll leave out Levi for now. They're an erva for Shimon. So that's where the Mishnah said that what? That halacha l'maisa, if the woman who falls to you in Yibum is an erva, then what? What's the halacha? Right? What's the halacha? Yevamos 101. What's the halacha? Nothing. She doesn't need anything. No Yibum, no Chalitza, because she's not in the parsha of Yibum. And we'll say, what else do we learn in the Mishnah? Yevamos 101. Who else does her status impact? Her co-wife, her tzara. And her tzara also is able to leave without Yibum or without Chalitza. Listen to this case. And we'll say, what happens? Let's give a simple case. Reuven married Shimon's daughter. Reuven married his niece. Okay, totally permitted, right? He marries his niece, and he has another wife. So we'll call her Rachel. And he also married another woman, Leah. And now we'll say, what happened? There's a case of Safek Kiddushin, Safek Gerushin. Right? There's a question about the Kiddushin, the marriage of Reuven to Rachel, Reuven to his niece. Or he divorced her, but there's a sheileimah about the divorce. Is it valid or not? So we'll say, here we're talking about a case of a man, right? Reuven's married to Rachel. Rachel is an erva to Shimon. And now we'll say there was a sheileimah in the Kiddushin or the Gerushin of Reuven to Rachel. And I will say, you know what happened? What happened next? What happened next? Reuven died. Reuven died. Oh, wow. Reuven died. I will say, now we've got a problem. What's the problem? We've got a situation of Reuven who we're not sure, was he married, was he not married to Rachel, who is an erva to Shimon. So I will say, now the shayla is, what's the obviously Rachel's not doing Yibam or Chalitza either way, right? Because she's Shimon's daughter. What's going to be the shayla, or who is the shayla on? On the tzara, on the co-wife. So watch this. V'kulan sheish ban kiddushin o gerushin b'safek harei elu atzaros choltos v'lo misyadmos. Okay, I guess I built it up a little too much. So it's actually not so dramatic, right? It's pretty simple, right? Just do chalitza. Right? When in doubt, just do chalitza. So in that case, Rabbosai, where there was a safek gerushin or a safek nisuin, something, a safek in the marriage, a safek in the get between Reuven and Rachel, ultimately Leah is going to have to do chalitza. Okay. So the Gemara says, by the way, what's the case of Safek Kiddushin, Safek Gerushin? This is great. So Kate said Safek Kiddushin, Zarak la Kiddushin, Safek Karov la, Safek Karov la, Zeh Safek Kiddushin. What's a good case of Safek Kiddushin? A man takes a ring. He says, Hare Ad Nikudesh Azliba Tabazu, and he throws it at her. Romantic. This guy's a keeper, right? This is a keeper, right? So what happens? He throws it at her, and there's a Safek. Is it closer to her? Is it closer to him? Rashi points out the case actually is where they're standing exactly 8 amos away from each other. Remember again, anything that falls into your dalet amos is yours. So in this case, if you could imagine, they are standing exactly 8 amos away from each other. It's a very frum couple, right? They're standing exactly 8 amos away from each other. He throws her the kiddushin, and it's not clear, is it closer to her? Is it closer to her? Is it in her dalet amos? Or in his dalet amos, and whatever it is, they never figure it out. That's a case of Safek Kiddushin, Safek Gerushin. Rabbi say, what's the case of Safek Gerushin? So watch this, Ksav b'ksav yado. Rabbi says, interesting case. Let's say he writes her a get, and the get is in his handwriting, ve'ein alav edim. So Rabbi says, interesting. One of the reasons that you need witnesses on a get is to certify the fact that the husband wrote this get, and he wrote it willingly. So what happens if you have a get that's in the husband's handwriting? So we'll say, if you think about it, there's no greater testament to the fact that the husband wrote this willingly than what? Than the fact that it's in his handwriting. So it has his handwriting, but it doesn't have witnesses. That's a safek get, whether or not it's good. Or yesh alav edim ve'in bozman. Or there are witnesses, but there's no date. We'll say, having a date on a get is incredibly important. Why? Because we'll say, again, with a get, what does a woman have the ability to do? Remarry. But also, again, come on, it's all about money, right? Collect her ksuva, right? That's what a get really enables her to marry, but also allows her to collect her money, right? So remember again, but that date is very important because she's even allowed to collect from encumbered properties, which means the date of the get is incredibly important. So let's say there's a get, but there's no date. Yesh uzman ve'ein bo ela eid, or there's a date, but only one get. All of these cases, Safek Zeu, Safek Gerushin. We'll say all of these cases are Safek Gerushin. And so therefore the Mishnah teaches me that if there's any Safek in the Kiddushin or the Gerushin between Reuven and Rachel, ultimately again, when Reuven dies, Leah is going to have to do Chalitza. Rabbi say we'll continue right through with these cases tomorrow. Shkoyach. All right, everyone, have a great day. Jerry, good to see you. She should have left after the third date. She should.